And what we're going to do today is to start out and tie you in to the information just with a prelude that is going to give this thing some context. And again, we'll be talking about this historic figure, Ankh Khonsu, which is, again, a central figure in history that has been kept hidden from us. Not many of us, I would imagine, would even be familiar with that name, but we're going to be familiar with that name tonight and going forward, because as we'll see, it's tied into end time prophecy, eschatological events, and what it is that we are encountering at this very moment. So the overall framework for what it is that we have been teaching recently is a document entitled Perceiving the Ancestors as Watchers or Guardians over Thought Forms. And the reason that I developed this was due to the fact that because of our indoctrination that we received in the captivity and in the historical era of our servitude to our enemies, the ancestors who were central and who are central to the life and culture of indigenous people, that aspect was removed. And it was turned into something that was taboo for a very important reason. The ancestors have been central and will be central to our freedom struggle, as well as our ascension into various areas of consciousness. So when I developed this, I wanted to demystify, on the one hand, I wanted to demystify this concept of the ancestor, and to give us more knowledge on this besides the kind of spookism and spiritism that this subject has been reduced to. There is a science to all of this, and we're going to get to it. When we talk about the ancestors, we're talking about heritage. And we're talking about familial relationships. We're also talking about genetic science. And when we talk about genetic science, that is based on one thing. That subject and every other subject that falls under the topic of science is based on dark energy, dark matter, or melanin. Dark energy, dark matter, or melanin. All roads lead to melanin. Believe that. All roads lead to and from melanin. Put it that way. So when we talk about the ancestors, our relationship with them and connection to the ancestors is related directly to melanin. Let's go into a little bit of the science first, and then we'll come back. So when we talk about heredity and lineage and heritage, there's a common term that we're all familiar with called DNA. All right. So I found this article on DNA activation and what they call expansion therapy. And they break it down probably better than I've seen anyone break it down. So we'll start here. Deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA, is a nucleic acid that contains all genetic instructions used in the development and functioning of all known living things. The main role of DNA is the long-term storage of information. Now, we know through our studies that this aspect of DNA is related to what is called the Akashic record, or Akasha, what the ancients called this, the function of what we now know as DNA. And all of this that we're talking about here is an aspect of melanin, an aspect or extension of melanin. DNA is often compared to a set of blueprints since it contains the instructions needed to construct components of cells. The DNA segments that carry genetic information are called genes, but other DNA sequences have structural purposes or are involved in regulating the use of genetic information. So we know that as we read this, that this is the function of all life and living organisms, that this has direct relation to DNA and thus melanin, since all of this again is an extension of melanin. The DNA segments that carry genetic information are called genes, but other DNA sequences have structural purposes or are involved in regulating the use of genetic information. Our DNA is therefore our personal blueprint, and as such contains all of our mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual information. So again, this has a link to the spiritual, or what we call the energetic. All right. This all has a link to the spiritual world and spiritual faculties and abilities as well. The DNA holds within its memory the blueprint of who we are physically in the physical plane, such as color of our hair and eyes. You all know that's determined by melanin, right? The color of our hair and eyes, and even the tendency for risk-taking, shyness, and hereditary illnesses. Brief history of DNA in humans. This is the important information. Many eons ago, the earth was first populated with the first humanoid beings. These are our ancient ancestors. All right? Now, but we must understand that these individuals were not categorized as gods. They were categorized, if we're going to use the term, they were categorized as titans. Titans. And it was the titans, according to the legend, that created the gods. Big difference here. We are connected through heredity to these first human beings. The DNA was quite different, and so were the humans. Now, this is why they're using the term humanoids, not because they were mutant in any way. If anyone is the mutant, it is us. These were closest to the blueprint of what the perfected man, the perfected woman should be. This was a pre-duality time-space. This was a pre-duality time-space on Earth. Pre-duality. And the humanoid race was semi-physical. So this is why they called them humanoid, because they were more spiritual or energetic than they were physical or material. I'll say that again. They were more spiritual or energetic than they were physical or material. And because of this, they were able to move freely among the third, fourth, and fifth dimensions. They were multi-dimensional. This is what we are returning to, family. Some beings had access to dimensions beyond the fifth. Their DNA had a minimum structure of 72 double helix pairs. Now, you take 72 and double it, you get 144. 144 is a very important number. In the book of Revelation, you have the 144,000. All right? That is not an actual number. That is to give you a hint that this is talking about heredity, some aspect of heredity, some aspect of a connection to ancestors and to ancient ancestors. They had DNA that contained a minimum of 70, a minimum structure rather, of 72 double strand helix pairs, or 144 pairs, and 128 condoms for their semi-physical nature. They had a different makeup, basic makeup than we have. We must understand this. There are 3 light-coated filaments or sugar pairs per condom. We won't get into that. We're just going to stay on the surface to introduce us to this DNA, because this is going to give us more insight and more understanding, and hopefully a clearer perception and concept of how we are connected to our ancestors and how, in terms of our spiritual evolution, our evolution in consciousness, that the ancestors have to be central in this. And the testimony is that one has stepped forward and introduced himself to us. That is going to aid us in our understanding of all of this. We've reached that point, family. The original humanoids fell into the current duality time-space structure, and the DNA was redefined to a 6 double-stranded helix, or 12 pairs. Now, 12 times 2 is what? 24. In the book of Revelation, you're going to see the 24 elders that surround the throne, all right, in the Revelation narrative. It was redefined to a 6 double-stranded helix, 12-pair combination. 144 paired DNA was no longer needed by humans only accessing the third dimension. But we're transitioning out of the third dimension. It's time. Are you all with me?
Okay.
So this is why the book of Revelation features the number 144. Because as a number, what? To shoot for. Are you all with me?
Okay.
It introduces in the narrative this 144,000 as the number to shoot for. 12,000 from each of the 12 tribes. We're familiar with the story. So this is what we're returning to. It remained at this 6 double-stranded helix structure for many millions of years until the manipulation and deactivation during the Atlantis time-space era. And we've covered that. We've covered that in the story of Yakub. This was the point in human history where the DNA was deactivated and reduced to a single double-stranded helix structure, and the codons were reduced from 128 to 20. 128 to 20. A loss of 108 codons. It has remained at this structure for millions of years, and only within the last 20 years has the information and energy been available to reactivate the original structure. This is the process of reactivation, family, that we're all a part of. And this necessitated the current class that we are all attending at this point, with the focus on what? Melanin. And the reactivation of melanin and all of those properties and abilities that are contained therein. For years, science has recognized that we have 2 active physical strands of DNA. In other words, 1 pair. They have also found an additional, listen, 5 double-stranded pairs, that is 10 DNA strands, that seem to be dormant. These are the strands that were deactivated during the Atlantis time-space era and have been non-active rather, within humans for millions of years. Scientists have identified these dormant strands, not knowing their function as junk DNA, as junk DNA. And this is the DNA that has been scientifically tabooed, denigrated as junk, and denigrated in religious symbols and religious symbolism. All right? You're going to find these things talked about as demons or evil spirits or jinn in religious or spiritual literature. Now, all of this is going to be connected to things that we already know about, the pineal gland and that sort of thing. But the most fundamental function of DNA is genetic, that connects us to information and instructions that is key to not only physical development, but an evolution, but spiritual and conscious development. All right? Go back to the top of the page and lead into this. So when we speak of our ancestors, inherent in that thought, like DNA, is that they have pertinent information for us. They sit over, guard, and watch thought forms. We'll get into what that means. In the Bible, they're referred to as they're referred to as angels, first of all, and ministering spirits sent forth to minister for them who shall be what? Heirs of salvation. This is all linked genetically. It has to do with heritage. It has to do with relationship energetically through DNA. There are certain of our ancestors that are called watchers from a far country in the scriptures. And I define here what this far country is. But more importantly, this word watchers, the far country simply means other dimensions. All right? Another dimension. But the word watcher is the Hebrew word natsar. The plural is natsarim for a male watcher. So we never want to leave the females out when at all possible. The feminine is natserot, natserot, natsarim, and natsarot. And for those of you that are familiar with the kingdom structure, we have the Sarim, and I think recently, Nezar, they included the sisters among the ministers or something like that happened recently, correct?
Okay.
Right. So again, this word, natsar, means to guard, to watch over, to keep, to preserve. especially as it relates to keeping something secret, closed, or hidden. All right? Verse 17 talks about these watchers from a far country as being keepers of a field. And we understand that a field is a particular branch of knowledge, study, or sphere of activity or interest. And sure enough, the ancients represent this idea of the ancestral watchers in this particular stela on the middle figure, where you see men on each side of the tree of knowledge. All right? And in back of each man is a winged figure that represents what is commonly and deliberately translated as a god. All right? But this is just the winged figure, just represents an energy that connects itself to the information that is contained on a particular branch of the tree. And the ancestors being represented as the humanoid figure or the human figure without the wings, representing those ancestors which guard over or watch over that particular thought form or branch of knowledge or branch of study or sphere of activity or interest. This is a anthropomorphized view or illustration of the function of DNA and melanin. Is everyone with me?
Okay.
It's
Yes.
just
Yes.
it's
Let me be
just
on mute.
a little vignette that is sketched out that shows us in the simplest terms and in exact terms, because our connection again is through heredity, it's through genetics. All right. So we have the information, the ancestor, and the particular energetic signature that is going, it's just like an electrical current. These gods, an electrical current that is going to carry this information into the physical world. All right. We see we recall Mercury or Hermes, the messenger of the god, and he's got the winged feet, right? The shoes with the wings on it. Or the angel Gabriel, that, supposedly brings messages from God, from the divine. Same idea, family. Exact same idea. But in less fairy tale terms and in more scientific terms. So we see these same representations throughout all cultures. These watchers or guardians over particular fields of knowledge. Psalms 91, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against the stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion the adder, the young lion, and the dragon thou shalt trample under feet. In other words, we're going to trample the lion, the adder, the young lion, the dragon. They all represent systems of knowledge. And trampling those things under feet simply means that by reason or with the help of our ancestors, we will be able to conquer any of the major forms of knowledge. We will trample them under feet. In other words, we will master them. We will master them. We will conquer. This is talking about the ability to conquer anything that you set your mind to. An example in history occurred in the slave revolt of 1791, where it is accounted that the oppressed people at that time, melanated people, connected with a particular ancestor and made a pact, a covenant or agreement following a big feast. Now, this is very important because we're going to read in the scriptures where at the end times it's going to be said that God is going to call all of the birds of heaven for a feast, right? This great feast at the Battle of Armageddon, the end of this particular age. Are you all with me?
Okay.
So again, this was followed by a feast. This is very important in honor of Azili Dantor or Azuli Danto. And we often mistake the mother with the child as a representation of what has been come to be known conveniently again as the Black Madonna. And although that characterization is accurate, the conception of it connects itself to a fictional character called Jesus Christ. We're going to connect it to the actual, genuine, historic character called Ankh Khonsu. All right? Very important. You have, throughout the centuries, family, millions and millions of people calling on the name of Jesus, or in the Hebraic Christian community, calling on the name of Yeshua, or Yeshua, or Yehoshua, or whatever. All right? Thinking that those are new names and that they are effective. Those are names and passwords that if they were ever effective, they were effective, as we're going to see, and I'm saying if they were ever effective, they were effective in a certain era that has passed by. So we need a new password. You all got to hear me. Don't mistake me now as a worshiper of Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Or any other thing, any other name. I'm talking about science here, not religion.
Okay.
I'm talking about science here, not religion. It'll get clearer as we go on. Again, this figure, female figure with the child and with the garland of 12 stars around her head is featured again in the book of the Revelation. but often and quite often misunderstood. When we turn back the pages of history, it leads us back to Kemet and the so-called goddess or Netcher that is Isis. And the reason that we know that this is Isis in both representations here is that she has the two scars under her right eye. And if you're familiar with the legend, with the Osirian myth, you will know how and why and from whom she received those two scars. All right? This is not Mary. This is the science that the fiction Mary, the Virgin Mary, is based on. This is an ancestral connection for us exclusively. And we, according to the account and according to history, in a freedom struggle, our ancestors in 1791 was able to tap into this energetic thought form and successfully fight their way to freedom. In Isaiah, the 11th chapter, verses 1 through 4, it encapsulates this idea of this energetic thought form, this energetic field that individuals would tap into in the last days. And it gives a detailed description of the abilities that would be present or resident in that individual, resident rather, in that individual once they tap into this specific energy field. The prophetic family tree or ancestral tree. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of its roots. Again, talking about this within the framework of a ancestral or hereditary connection. You all got to see that. And once activated or once accessed, this particular energetic field or thought form will give the person what's called the Spirit of the Lord. And it says it will rest upon that individual, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Lord. And these individuals will judge not after the sight of their eyes, neither reprove by the hearing of their ears. In other words, they're going to move from the physical senses to the higher senses of spirit and consciousness. That is moving from left brain dominance initially to right brain dominance. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And he, the seed, shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. We are going to be equipped for battle. Not carnal warfare, but spiritual warfare. That's Isaiah 11, 1 through 4. When it talks about this branch that is going to grow, the word branch is the word natser. Now remember, we already looked at this word watcher, which was natsar. Closely related to that, because this is talking about the same thing, is this branch called natser. Natser. And it says that it's using the term branch and roots, these terms that are related to plants or life that is energetic. The energetic aspect of that life is chlorophyll instead of melanin, which is the counterpart in plants. It's talking about in terms of the greenness of the color, but the actual definition means to guard, to keep a secret, and this word Natsir relates to Samson or Shimshon, who was a Natsarim or a Nazarite, and Jesus or Yeshua was a Nazarene. All right? Same connection to this word Natsir or Natsar, talking about individuals that or Bible characters that we know, whom we know rather, for their supernatural spiritual abilities, energetic abilities. Again, Natsar means to guard, to protect, to maintain, to obey, to conceal, or uncover a hidden thing or an uncovered thing. These are the definitions. And all of these things, family, lead back to a much earlier myth or a much earlier tale that is the monomyth for all myths, all tales, whether they're in the Quran, whether they're in the Bible, whether they're in any of the sacred writings. The most popular monomyth is that of Osiris, and we see him represented here with green skin, which connects him to the branch, right? Or this word Natsar or watcher. He is the prototype for the watcher. And the monomyth undergirds the monomyth of Osiris, Heru or Horus, and Isis is the basis for the Bible story that we're most familiar with. Jesus, the Holy Spirit, or Jesus the Father, and Mother Mary, the virgin birth. All right? Connected to green Osiris is another character called Al-Qadir. And Al-Qadir was a name that I was given recently as I began the ascent into consciousness that led to this class. And this again was supernaturally revealed. Al-Qadir being the first among the unseen beings and guides who are among us. In other words, he's a watcher. This is just representing the, in general, the function of the ancestors that guide us through what? Our spiritual evolution, our spiritual journey through consciousness. These are guides, helpers, watchers, ministers, however you want to put it, who we are encouraged to do what? Call upon for help. This is why, family, this aspect of a new name, as talked about in the book of the Revelation, is so important. This stone with a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he that receiveth it. We have been given this stone with this new name written on it. Ankh Khonsu. All right? So we're going to get right into it now. Any questions at this point? Comments?
I do. This is Mahek. Earlier, when you were talking about the earlier mankind,
Yes.
the original, is this the same entities who were they were like really like ethereal, and that you could like they were very light, you could see through them
Yes.
because they did not succumb at that time to the things of this world.
Yes.
What do you call it? Okay.
The material aspects, they were more spiritual than they
Yes.
were material.
Yes. So you and consequently that was the reason why you could see through them, because they were of that nature.
That's correct.
And the more dense, because they did not have the density that our bodies have now. Um, and they were not carnal minded in all of those things. So the other thing is, in your readings, as you were researching this, did you come across any specific names such as Palladians?
No.
No. Okay.
That is an entirely, I would say just in general that that's an add-on. It's a distraction, and
Okay.
it is coming from basically. I'm talking about the general take on this.
Mm-hmm.
General take and the general information about the Palladians is a white supremacist distraction.
Okay.
It's a white supremacist distraction. And we'll go over that now. That being said, there is some verifiable fact in that because all lies and attempts at deception have a kernel of truth in it. All right. So we're not going to entirely dismiss that, but for time's sake, I'll make that statement. And at a later date, we'll get into, the whole UFO thing and, alien agenda and all that kind of stuff that has grown from that particular information.
Okay.
All
I'm
right.
looking forward to it.
All right. Good.
One other thing you said, for the sake of clarity, when you were talking about the Atlantis, or around that particular period of time,
Yes.
was it during or right after when they moved to a different area?
What was what
The
during
Atlantis,
or right after?
you said it. Well, when you were talking about the Atlantis and the earlier today, a little while back, relative to early mankind and having the knowledge,
Right.
because and I'm still, you know, open and still researching, because there was a split and there was a period of time when they had to leave Atlantis because, you know, the flooding, or I should say the shifting, so to
Right.
speak. And so there were people who were the keepers of the knowledge who were related to the Native Americans.
This is
And,
all going
and
to be, yes, this is all going to be connected up very much.
okay,
We're on the same path.
okay,
We're on
all
the
righty,
same path. So
okay,
yeah, just stay tuned. We're gonna get to that. Actually, very quickly, we'll get to that.
okay. Thank you.
All right. Any more questions or comments? All right. Here we go. Ankh Afnakansu. Subtitle: Aiding Our Transition from Solar to Cosmic. Aiding our transition from solar to cosmic. And again, family, this has to do with this hidden manna that was talked about. Not directly, but indirectly. We're going to talk about this Ankh Afnakansu in terms of an ancestor that whose mission at this particular period of time is to not only guide us, but to guard us. All right? Not only to guide us, you know, in terms of higher uh, echelons of knowledge, higher echelons and levels of consciousness, but specifically as well to guard us as the guardian angels do, you know, as heirs to our inheritance.
Real real quickly, is there a way that the screen, I mean, you can ascertain whether or not I'm just seeing it small, or other individuals are also seeing the screen as being almost, you know, like too small to read?
Is anyone having a problem reading the screen?
It, it is very small. When you have highlighted it, I can see it a little better. I've had to put on my reading glasses, but it's really tiny because it's part of the screen. I don't know how we can make it bigger individually. If we can come out of this side. See, I have the people listed. Let me see.
That's better.
That's a little better. When you get rid of that side piece, it's a little better
Well, yeah, you have to
because
do that. You have to do that on your
on your
smart.
own computer. Yeah, I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Chat.
You touch it and then you widen it with your finger. That's what I'm
Oh,
doing on my phone.
oh, well,
Yeah,
I don't know.
if you're
I'm
on
on a laptop.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
It's not working on mine. It's only widening the side screen, not the actual screen.
Mm.
Oh,
Exactly.
okay.
Mine too.
okay. All right. Well, I have the writing at 300%, so it's probably uh, on
Yes,
your phone.
Egyptian goddess.
I think it's
Oh, yeah, that's good. It's better now. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So the ancient text referring to Ankh Afnakansu reads on this wise: The dead man, Ankh Afnakansu, hath parted from the darkling crowds, hath joined the dwellers of light, opening duat. We're going to define what that is. Star abodes. Now again, the transition from solar energy of the sun to cosmic energy, stellar energy. Their keys receiving. So he's sitting over this knowledge currently. This was a bona fide historic figure that lived in the 25th, 26th dynasty of ancient Kemet, a time where there was very profound division between the population. One group of people focused on this nature, this group of gods, as it were. Another group, another set of nature or powers, and they were at odds. And Ankh Khonsu rose up, and in an effort to unify these warring factions, he suggested that they shift their focus on a more ancient form of knowledge that he had mastered during that time period, and had found out that both of the different branches derive from that particular root. Are you all with me? So he suggested, hey, let's go back to this. But he was rejected during his lifetime. Now, this is the story of the Christ, the Jesus Christ figure in the Bible, where it states that he came unto his own, and his own received him not. And we'll find out John 1:11. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. Now again, we're not talking about the same type of belief in Jesus Christ. You all know me better than that. You know where I've come from. We're not talking about that. But what we're trying to point out is that the Jesus character of the Bible, that was a fictitious character, is based directly on Ankh Khonsu and what occurred in history in real time. Again, in the narrative concerning him, he is referred to as the self-slain Ankh Khonsu, who, like Christ, came to die. All right? So when he knew he wasn't going to be successful, he planned for and accomplished a second coming, much the same as the second coming of Christ, the second Buddha, the Imam Mahdi, the Messiah. All of those myths are based on this true story. And we're going to take a look very quickly at the stela, this Egyptian artifact, Kemetan artifact, that was discovered relatively recently and translated, and is going to tell the story, which is critical for us to understand in our journey along this path of higher consciousness.
Some years back, a certain Egyptian funerary offering stela caught my attention. This particular stela was used in the funerary process of an individual who it identifies by the name of Ankh and Khonsu, which can be translated as meaning, he lives in Khonsu. The etymology of the word stela is New Latin, from the Greek stele, a usually stone slab or pillar. This particular stela is made of wood and covered with plaster, which has been painted on both the front and back surfaces. This stela is a fairly typical example of offering stelas as employed in Thebes, Wast, as it was known, toward the end of the Third Intermediate Period. This one is dated circa 680 to 70 BCE. Several similar examples can be seen at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. This stela was not on display when I visited there in May of 2013. I have been told that it is in storage until the new Grand Egyptian Museum opens near Giza. What follows is an explanation of the illustrations and hieroglyphic text, using methods of contemporary Egyptology. I have typeset the hieroglyphs herein for clarity. We will begin by examining the figures appearing in the vignette at the top of the front side and the text that describes them. Arching over the top is a figure of the deity called Nut, though she had...
Now, Nut, this is very important, because Nut is representing the simulated reality of the solar system, And remember the transition that Ankh of Khonsu is here to aid, is the transition from the solar system, which is represented by Nut, the closed arch of the solar system. All right? So that is the first and most important element, symbolically.
Accompanying text on this stela, naming or describing her. Next, we see a figure of a winged solar sphere. The text beneath it is read from right to left. It reads, Bahudut Nutcher Nept Pet. Bahudut, great Nutcher, the Lord of the Sky. The word Nutcher is the masculine singular form of the Egyptian word usually translated as God or deity. More literal translations might use words like power or force. The feminine form of this word is Nutchat. The masculine and generic plural form is Nutcharu, and the feminine plural is Nutcharut.
Now, we're going to see this winged disc. You see it represented over the tree of knowledge. You all see it right there, central, right over the tree of knowledge.
Yes.
All right. Same representation, same meaning. And again, any questions?
Akita,
Yes.
again, when I was going through rites of passage, I studied what they call hieroglyphics. The term we use, those of us that were studying here on the East Coast, is Medu Necher, which means sacred word. Medu Necher is word sacred, which of course it's what sacred word.
Right.
So Necher is the sacred, or like he said, God. That was it.
That's right. Absolutely right. and we see the winged, I'm sorry, we see the representation of Nuit in the central panel here. You see the man on his knees looking outside the solar system that contains what? The sun, moon, and the stars.
Yeah.
And he's looking outside that arched dome, looking
Mm-hmm.
into the cosmic reality.
And he's reaching too.
Yes, making that transition from the solar to the cosmic. So we see these symbols. Now, the stars here seem to be represented as part of or inside the enclosure. However, once you do intense research, it appears from in terms of light that the stars are outside of the enclosed structure. All right. And that it looks like the stars are shining outside this structure when viewed from Earth. And it looks like you're looking at almost something that is underwater. Or in other words, it's being viewed through this firmament, this water firmament that the Bible said was above the earth. That's a subject for another aspect of this study, but I just want to make that observation. So again, the winged disc that is represented over the tree of knowledge or a field of knowledge. All right. This is going to be very consistent as we go further into the study. So getting back to the video.
In discussion of Egyptian religious concepts, I use the forms of Nutyar and the word deity interchangeably. The name Behutit is an abbreviated form of Haru Behutit, or Horus of Edfu. In modern Edfu stands one of the best preserved temples in Egypt. On its walls, the legend of Haru Behutit appear in bas relief.
Now, we see Khonsu standing before Heru, all right, or Horus, the seated figure with the hawk's head. His hand extended, making an offering, a gesture of making an offering. And we're going to understand exactly what he offered as we look at the video.
This winged solar sphere is a form of the deity Haru, or Horus. The round glyph with the X shape in the center, denoted as O49 in Alan H. Gardner's sign list, is what contemporary Egyptologists refer to as a determinative. Determinatives are usually unspoken glyphs, used in conjunction with other spoken glyphs to more clearly define the context. In other words, it's a semantic indicator. In this case, although it refers to a deity, this determinative indicates an association with a specific place and geographic location.
Again, Nahe, it is associated with a specific place and geographic location. A specific place and geographic location. This has to do with the comment that Nahe made about Atlantis being associated with the Native American indigenous people. And this is going to be true. And very quickly, this connection is going to be made here.
See a seated figure. He is hawk-headed, with a solar sphere and Uraeus serpent upon his head, and a was scepter in his hand. The text associated with this figure is read from top to bottom, right to left. It reads, Ra herachti hare nucharu. Ra herachti, supernal of deities. Here we focus on the name Ra herachti. Taken literally, it could be said to mean Ra Horus of the two lands. It could also be said,
there you go, Horus of the two lands. Of the two lands.
I mean, Ra Horus of the two horizons.
Of the two horizons, one in the east, the other in the west, we're going to see. And the focus is going to be in terms of end-time events. This thing is going to be wrapped up. The final chapter is going to be wrapped up in the west. In the west.
Behind Ra Herachti, we see two glyphs, a hawk perched atop a standard, a symbol for Amenti, the west.
The west. The west. All right?
These as the deity, Her Amenti, Horus of the west, or as separate indications of Amenti, the west, and the presence of the Ba of Haru, Horus. We will discuss the concept of the Ba soul a little bit later. Next, we will have a look at the human figure on the right-hand side of the vignette and the hieroglyphs associated with him. This figure is the person to whom this stela is dedicated. He is depicted in a posture or gesture called nis, that is, a beckoning, making an offering to Ra Herachti. The hieroglyphic text here reads, in this example, from top to bottom, left to right, Auser Hamnucher Manchu Nebwast Un Ahwi Nupet Em Epitsut Ankh en Khonsu Ma'a Haru. This may be translated as Auser, Osiris, priest of Manchu, lord of Wast, Thebes, opener of the doors of the sky in Apitsut, Karnak, Ankh en Khonsu, true of voice. Male persons in such funerary texts are referred to as Ausir, that is, Osiris, indicating that they are deceased. Similarly, women are referred to as Hutat, that is, Hathor, or sometimes as Auset, that is, Isis, in such texts.
Okay, the connection to Isis again. The connection to Isis yet again.
Here, to which this stela is dedicated, is identified as Ankh en Khonsu. Here we see the glyphs that compose his name highlighted. The name Ankh en Khonsu can be translated as he lives in or for Khonsu. Khonsu is a member of the Theban triad comprised of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. In the Karnak temple complex, there stands a temple dedicated to Khonsu. Ankh en Khonsu is identified as a priest of Manchu, a deity with a strong martial association.
With a strong martial association. That means he is warlike. All right? That we get the term martial arts. He's a warrior. He's a warrior.
Who has a significant presence in Wast, Thebes, Karnak Temple, and elsewhere in the vicinity, which is modern-day Luxor. The paddle or boat oar-shaped hieroglyph following his name is an abbreviated form of the expression Ma'a Haru. Though here it is shortened to just Haru, it should be understood in its full meaning. Ma'a Haru is often variously translated as justified, victorious, or more literally as true of voice. In funerary texts, the deceased is referred to as true of voice, likely with the intention that they are recognized as such in their journey through the afterlife.
True of voice simply means that he can talk the talk and walk the walk. Are you all with me?
Okay.
He can do what he says he can do, and he will do what he says he will do.
Absolutely.
All right? That's what true of voice means.
There are various ways in which this can be written in hieroglyphs. On this particular stela, we find it abbreviated simply by the boat oar-shaped hieroglyph, denoted as P8A in Alan H. Gardner's sign list, or in conjunction with the plinth-shaped hieroglyph, denoted as AA11 in Gardner's sign list. This glyph, with the phonetic value of Ma'a, is shaped like the plinth, which anthropomorphized versions of the deity Ma'at, Nuchat of truth, balance, and justice, is often depicted standing upon.
Now he's connected with the so-called goddess Ma'at, which stands for justice and judgment. All right?
The last item of note which we find in this vignette is a table on which offerings are made. The glyphs beneath the table are read left to right, describing the offerings. Tahankt ka'u upchu. Bread, beer.
Bread. You remember we talked about the manna, bread of heaven.
Okay.
Right?
Cattle and fowl. There's an interesting side note here with regard to the cattle and fowl. There appears to be a connection between ka'u upchu, as cattle and fowl, being made as offerings to or on behalf of the deceased, and ka'u upchu, meaning ka, spirits of Aptu, or Abydos, the city of Osiris, being near homonyms, though they are written with different hieroglyphs. I think it likely that this play on words is intentional. I recently observed a double play on words appearing in the 8th hour of the night as depicted in the Amduat. Likewise, similar literary devices are employed in the Hebrew Old Testament, in Psalms and or Proverbs, as I recall. In English today, the words soul and spirit have become virtually interchangeable, losing much of their more subtle meanings. That has not always been the case. In fact, languages such as Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, just to name a few, make very clear distinction between their words for these concepts and their contextual usage. Those of us familiar with the Hebrew Kabbalah are likely aware there are at least 5 different words to denote specific aspects of the soul. The ancient Egyptian language and religion are no less detailed and specific in this area.
So we'll cut that off right there. And it's at a critical point. What he is offering, family, is his soul to the west, a very specific location to the west, to the west. Everything that he had mastered during his lifetime, this ancestor is offering to Heru of the West. If you are on this call and on this path, you are Heru, the hero of the West. So it ain't referring to no, it's referring to something that is inside of you genetically that contains the information that has been hidden inside you, ready to activate at this time. Everyone has a testimony of how something just led you to this. You had to know. You couldn't follow your family, couldn't follow your friends, couldn't follow the church or the religious tradition that you were brought up in. It led you to this point. You are Heru in the West. We represent the heroes of the West. And our ancestor has revealed himself as being the one in history that foresaw just like all of the compendium of ancient seers and wise men saw this narrative. They saw this adventure story ending up and coming to culmination in the West. This brother understood that as well and offered his being, offered himself as a guide, as a protector, spiritually, as a teacher. This gets much, much deeper as we go into the various prophetic prophecies that originated in the West among indigenous people. And while we won't get to that today, we're going to touch on just one that relates directly to Khonsu and his ministry. And that is, family, the Hopi Indian prophecy, the story of the blue Kachina and the red Kachina. We'll get into that at a much later date. But rest assured, Nahe, we're going to connect this thing to the so-called indigenous Americans, the Amerindians, the Native Americans, however we want to call it, Mesoamericans, the ancient indigenous people. And that ties in directly to us. All right, I'm going to take a break and pause here for about 10 minutes. And we'll resume at about 8:35, 8:40, all right? And we're going to start out this final portion by, again, pointing out the garment that the brother Ankh Khonsu is wearing. And it is a leopard skin. More importantly, it is a jaguar skin. And we're going to connect this up with a little known legend of the Jesus or Yeshua figure that our ancestors purposely included this legend, a different story of the Jesus origin that they purposely included in the historic lexicon and in the historic record that is going to connect this figure directly with contemporary events. This is a leopard skin, or more specifically, a jaguar skin, the golden jaguar, or the golden leopard, or the golden panther. All right, more specifically, the golden panther. Before we get into that, just make special note, we're going to talk about these multiple ions or eras or epochs of time, because from a prophetic standpoint, a lot of the information, a lot of the prophecies are misunderstood because most of the people that are interpreting these things or decoding them, they do not give credence to these ions of time. All right. In the religion of Thelema, it is believed that the history of humanity can be divided into a series of ions, each of which is accompanied by its own forms of magical and religious or spiritual or energetic expression. Now, the reason why I use Thelema, all right, is again because of our ancestors. The Thelemic religion is connected to the efforts of one of our ancestors that existed in the late 18th century in Europe and the early 19th century or thereabouts in the Americas. And this is Pascal Beverly Randolph, who was responsible for transferring the ancient esoteric knowledge from the East to the West, singularly responsible for. He was a teacher, a great teacher, renowned teacher of esoteric knowledge, and his students included the royals in Europe and America, as well as the presidents and members of so-called high society. This information was hijacked by this woman here, Helen Blavatsky, and other members and co-founders of what is called the OTA, and they developed this Thelemic religion, this so-called religion of Thelema. All right? So I use this because I know that this is our information. Are y'all with me? The first the first of these ions is the ion of Isis, which Thelemites believe occurred during prehistory and which saw mankind worshiping, and they use the word worship, that's their word, not mine. I don't believe our ancestors were worshiping anything. Occurred during prehistory and which saw mankind worshiping a great goddess, symbolized by the ancient Egyptian deity Isis. In Thelemite beliefs, this was followed by the Ion of Osiris, a period that took place in classical and medieval centuries, when humanity again worshipped a singular male god, symbolized by the Egyptian god Isis. And indeed, this is what all the major religions are of modern times is based on, and was therefore dominated by patriarchal values. And we can see in the Bible and other so-called sacred ancient writings, this replacing of the feminine, the hiding of the feminine element, the obscuring of the feminine element in favor of the male or patriarchal figure. That is why today most people can't talk about divinity without saying he, or the father God, or talking about it in terms of husband, or the male aspect, some aspect of the patriarchal element. And finally, the third ion, the ion of Horus, which was controlled by the child god, symbolized by Horus or Heru, that is the hero. And this is why we emanated into the physical realms at the time that we did, because we are going to play the role of Heru, the hero. In this new ion, it is believed that humanity will enter a time of self-realization and self-actualization. This is what everyone on this call is experiencing. This is why you are on this call. To accomplish the goal of what? Self-realization, self-actualization. Within the Thelemite religion, each of these ions, this is very important, is believed to be characterized by their own specific magical formula. This is what we've been talking about from the beginning, family. Activating power, activating these magical qualities that reside in all of us, the use of which is very important and fundamental to the understanding of what they refer to as thelemic magic. And it's the magic of our ancestors. It's not thelemic magic. What they mean by thelemic, we're going to find out. Thelema just means will, just means the power, the divine willpower, the divine willpower. As a man thinketh, as a woman thinketh, so is he. The power of life and death in the tongue, right? That idea. The eon of Isis, the first eon of Isis was maternal, where the female aspect of the Godhead was revered due to a mostly matriarchal society, and the idea that Mother Earth nourished, clothed, and housed man in the womb, closed in the womb of the matrix, in the womb of the matrix. And we saw that symbolized by Nut and the enclosure, the closed, housed and closed in the womb of the matrix. So we looked at that man emerging from the solar system. It was characterized by pagan worship of mother and nature. Now they characterize it as pagan. That's their word. In his Equinox of the Gods, Crowley describes this period as simple, quiet, easy, and pleasant. The material ignores the spiritual. Lon Milo Duquette remarked that this eon, the age of the great goddess, was the age of the great goddess, and that it had originated in prehistory. Now this takes it back to that time, around the time of what is referred to as Atlantis, And in fact, the name Atlantis is the name of a feminine energy or a feminine goddess. It is derived or corresponds to this overriding idea of a feminine eon or feminine goddess, or the focus on the feminine energy exclusively, reaching its zenith at approximately 2400 BC. Like every ion, the magical formula of the Ion of Isis was founded upon man's interpretation of the perceived facts of nature, not the actual fact, but the perceived facts of nature. And our Ician age progenitors or ancestors perceived nature as a continuous process of spontaneous growth. Very important. The Ion of Osiris is simply the age in which death reigns. And it reigns to the extent that even the gods die. So this is the age during which the popularization of the Jesus Christ suffering servant figure was popularized and spread it abroad, and was deeply embedded in the consciousness of man. The classical and medieval Ion of Osiris is considered to be dominated by the paternal principle and the formula of the dying god. This Ion was characterized by that of self-sacrifice and submission to the Father God, while man spoke of his father and mother. Crowley says this Ion in his Heart of the Master, says rather of this Ion, in his Heart of the Master, the formula of Osiris, whose word is Yao, so that men worship man, thinking him subject to death, and his victory depended upon resurrection. And that is resurrection from an outside or external force. Therefore, victory being dependent on an outside or external force, not an internal force. And all throughout these dissertations, I've been emphasizing that everything that you do, everything that you're going to experience, everything that you're going to accomplish is not going to occur by focusing outside yourself. That all of these things, all of these ability, all of this power is resident within you. Even so conceived they the Son, as slain and reborn every day and every year. And so the different solstices, that occur and that people have focused their attention on throughout the ages. The second Ion is of suffering and death. This Ion of Osiris is about suffering and death. And our history, the history of melanated people, especially in the Americas, but all around the world, was concentrated within this period of suffering and death. The spiritual strives to ignore the material. Christianity and all cognate religions worship death, glorify suffering, and deify corpses. The third and final, and this is the one that we are currently experiencing, is the age of Horus or Heru, the ion of the crowned and conquering child of the gods. That's all of us. The modern ion of Horus is portrayed as a time of self-realization, as well as growing interest in all things spiritual, and is considered to be dominated by the principle of the child. This is why in the scripture it says, "Suffer the little children to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of heaven," and that we have to be returned to a child. In other words, that we have to take ourselves back to before we were what? Indoctrinated and programmed into this system. The word of its law is thelema, or will, which is complemented by agape love. That is perfect balance. Will and desire counterbalanced by the principle of love. And its formula is abra hadabra. Abra hadabra. This is creating and accomplishing things through the breath of your mouth. That two-edged sword emerging from the mouth of the conqueror in the book of the Revelation. Abra hadabra. Individuality and finding the individual's true will, that is the genuine desire of your heart, are the dominant aspects. Its formula is that of growth in consciousness and love towards self-realization. And again, this is where we are at. We looked at this symbol here as it was presented behind the throne or the seat of Heru. Do you all see it here? It is this symbol of a bird on top of a semicircle with two uneven projections coming from it, right here. And in the brief documentary and teaching on this particular stela, it said that represented the so-called goddess Amenti, which meant the West, the West. The name Amenti is a derivative of the word Amentet, the goddess of the dead, or the personification of the West. Again, indicating, family, that this is all going to, this final chapter is going to occur in the West, in the West.
Okay.
So again, we're making this connection. The brother here in the leopard skin pointing, facing the West, making his offering to Heru, Amenti, Heru of the West, and is offering what? His entire soul, his entire spirit, meaning everything that he is and everything that he accomplished during his life, that we have access to that, and that we are connected genetically through the DNA and have access to this not only this information, but these abilities, this power source through a new name, Khonsu, Ankh Afnakansu, the truth that crosses over. This is what and it's going to have to cross over. His name means to combine
Okay.
the word meaning to cross over, wanderer, he who traverses. Now, that is the same meaning of the word Eber, which we get Hebrew from. All right? Misura wisely counted the 12 objects on the table, colored in red, black, and green, right? The truth that has crossed over. We said that it was Pascal Beverly Randolph that brought this esoteric knowledge from the East to the West. He is the father of the New Age movement in the West, the father of all occult and esoteric knowledge in the West, a melanated brother, our ancestor. Are you all with me?
Okay.
So, Amentet is the personification of the West. And she was the one who is, we are told, welcomes the deceased to their new dwelling place in the netherworld. And we see her represented as the Statue of Liberty, standing at the shore or the edge of the land of the dead. Remember that the Statue of Liberty originally was supposed to be a black woman, representing what? This aspect or the different aspects of Isis. The different aspects of
Yes.
Isis. But they rejected that for a more European representation. And the legend that is written on the Statue of Liberty directly relates to this beckoning or welcoming of the dead to Amenti, the West. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-styed. To me, I lift my lamp beside the golden door. And anyone that is familiar with the symbolism of this figure, and again, we won't go into it, but this is the queen. This is the queen of hell, or the queen of the underworld, which traces back to Amenti and Isis and Sekhmet. So we know that as we do the connection, that this is going to be connected directly to the so-called United States, which is the land of our ancient indigenous ancestors.
Okay.
This is connected, family, through a ritual. I'm sorry, through a legend that is going to lead us right up to our to contemporary times and our conclusion. Khonsu is the third and central figure in the Egyptian triad of Amun, Khonsu, and Mut. Amun, Khonsu, and Mut. Listen very carefully. Khonsu is a moon god, son of Amun and Mut, or Mut, one of the triad of Thebes. He had a companion, and he is considered as violent. This is going to connect us to a legendary character named Yeshua or Yeshu ben Pandera, or Ben Pandira, or Ben Pandera, or Ben Panthera. Remember, the brother got on a panther skin, a leopard skin, a jaguar skin. Y'all see it?
Yes.
He is the character, the genuine historic figure that the Jesus or Yeshua or Yehoshua character is based on in the biblical narrative. He's the real deal. According to the legend, approximately 100 years BCE, there lived a person named Yeshua ben Pandera, who was born the bastard or illegitimate child of his mother, Mary, and biological father named Joseph Pandira, who lived next door to Mary. One night, as the legend goes, Joseph Pandira came home drunk, and upon encountering his neighbor Mary, raped her. She conceived, and according to so-called Jewish custom, would have been put to death. But the man that she was engaged to, Joseph ben Stada, married her to take away her reproach. Because this child was conceived in such a manner and was therefore seen as a quote unquote bastard child, Joseph ben Stada took his wife Mary and her son Yeshua and moved to Egypt, where this child received an education. Now, this is very, very pregnant with a lot of hidden meaning. But the so-called bastard child represents us cut off from our true origin. And we have to do what? Go back to Egypt, go back to ancient Kemet to make the connection, to get the proper information that educates us on all of this. We won't get into detail any more than that, but that is the gist of that particular legend. Whereas an early period when Christ came down to earth in a physical body. Now, when they refer to Christ, they're not referring to Jesus. They're referring to Khonsu. Human beings could not perceive him otherwise than a physical body. This is why he came unto his own, and they didn't receive him at that time. There are actually awakening in our age the forces through which they shall see the Christ, and they're going to see the Christ in you. Not in a physical body or in terms of a physical form, but in a form which shall exist on the astral plane as an etheric form. This is the plane, the astral plane, family, is the plane that we can contact our ancestors, the plane where we can contact Khonsu. Are you all with me?
Mm-hmm.
Even in our country, from the 1930s on, and ever increasingly to the middle of the century, a great number of human beings will behold the Christ in etheric form. This will constitute the great advance beyond the earlier epoch when human beings were not yet ripe for beholding him thus. This is what is meant by saying that Christ will appear in the clouds, for this means that he will appear as an etheric form on the astral plane. This is one of our abilities, is to astral travel. Another one of our abilities is to communicate directly with any ancestor of our choosing, to get guidance, to get information that is critical to our journey. This is under the subject Jesu ben Pandira by Rudolf Steiner from the Rudolf Steiner archives. Very important individual. Will return to connecting Steiner up to our history. So, the word Pantera Negra means Black Panther, bringing this right up to date. Right up to date. This movie has been seen by more human beings than any movie in history. Third largest grossing film ever. This came, family, at the perfect time. This is not just a movie. It was supposed to lead us to connect back with a certain thought form, a certain field of knowledge that is resided over by a very specific ancestor. And here he's dressed like he's going to see the Black Panther. You remember people dressed up. And he's got the panther skin on. He's going to be connected to a very specific character that I pointed out before as well. And this is going to communicate to us critical information on on what frequency we should be vibrating on at this time. Wakanda is a term employed by the Omaha, Ponca, Osage, Quapaw, Kansa, Ota, Missouri, and Iowa tribes of the Siouan family when the power believed to animate all natural forms is spoken to or spoken of in supplications or rituals. This power that gives life to everything, family, is melanin. They refer to it by the name Wakanda in the Americas. The dialects of the first 5 tribes are closely related. The Omaha and Ponca speak practically alike. The Osage, Quapaw, and Kansa differ somewhat from the former in pronunciation, while the Ota, Missouri, and Iowa have so far changed their speech as to be unintelligible to others. The word Wakanda, spelled Wakanda by Riggs in his Dakota dictionary, is given to him as a verb symbolized to reckon as holy or sacred, to worship. The noun is wakan and is defined as a spirit or something sacred. Then he give his spirit and soul to the West, presented it, and is presenting it to us at this particular point. He's wearing a jaguar skin. Of the species Panthera anca angusta. Panthera anca augusta. And we know that it was Killmonger that represented the golden jaguar. When we did the decoding of the Black Panther film, go back, these are different aspects of the same energetic principle. And these are different powers that and aspects of self that reside in all of us. The Black Panther and the Golden Jaguar. And these characters represented, we said that that Eric Stevens, Killmonger, represented the id, and Black Panther the ego. All right? Black Panther the ego. Go back and look at that film where we decoded the Black Panther. This is the connection. Indigenous Americans recognized the universal force from which they came. The Algonquin tribes called this force or spirit Manitou, while the Iroquois called it Orenda. To the Inuit, it was Sila. On the Great Plains, it was Wakanda. The Maya of South America called it Ka'ul. Wakanda, the Native American origin, means possesses magical powers. Remember, in the different ions, they required different forms of knowledge and different magical powers. Different magical powers. The only thing that we've been focusing on throughout these many classes that we've done so far is activating these so-called magical powers. Wakanda. They wanted you to believe, bear with me, that Wakanda was in Africa. According to the comics, Wakanda is located in northeastern Africa. Its exact placement on the map has varied depending on the source. It's generally accepted as being north of Tanzania. So even in the comic book mythology, they located it in Africa, Northeast Africa. But we're seeing that the word, the etymology, historic etymology of the word, comes from the Americas. The meaning of the name Wakanda is possesses magical powers. The origin of the name Wakanda is Native American. This is the culture in which the name originated, or in the case of a word, the language. If Black Panther would have been based in ancient America, since all of its concepts are Aboriginal American, then it would have inspired its targeted audience, that is, melanated individuals, reclassified as Aboriginal Americans, to take their continent, America, back from the enforcers and the oppressors and regain control over their lives, politically using their identity. And we understand that these native Panther tribes were all over the Americas in pre-Columbian times. As a matter of fact, Wakanda is a Dakota Indian site in Wisconsin. Wakanda Park. And we see east of St. Paul is Wakanda Park. Not only that, it's located in South Dakota, the origin of the Dakota Indians. There's a city named Wakanda there. When you realize Black Panther is a psyops film that's Africanizing, I'll say the heck out of Aboriginal American culture to take Black Americans' minds away from their grandparents, homeland, and emotionally identify with Africa instead of their grandparents' real lineage, our history is given away to another continent. So our ancestors' family, we have to understand the brilliance and the power of them. They knew that this would take place. And here comes a brother from the East giving himself to the West so that we make the connection, not only with the film, but through the film, making the connection to our true historic roots. Y'all got to see how powerful this is. The meaning of the name Wakanda is, again, possesses magical powers. The origin of the name Wakanda is Native American. This is the culture in which the name originated, or in the case of the word, the language Sioux. The black coat is simply a color variation. In other words, the black coat of the panther is simply a color variation. And in this figure, you can see that it has, although it's dark, mostly black, that you look at it from an angle, you can see the striated patterns on the panther. So when we said in the movie, when we decoded the movie, that these are just different aspects of the same thing that they put at odds in the film. And this brother, Ankh Khonsu, saw that same thing in real time, brothers against brothers, in his time, and sought to do what? Unify it by a particular field of knowledge that he had mastered, that showed that these shared, that the warring factions shared the same roots. So here we are making this connection at the critical time. Jaguar is Native American word meaning he who kills with one blow. Remember, Khonsu was considered violent. He was considered as violent, the same way that Killmonger, Eric Stevens, the id, the warring or martial aspect of the movie, was considered violent and too violent for some people's taste. And they did not and could not, because of pre-programming, make this connection across eons of time. But here it is. Here it is, family. We're being presented with it. As for the mythology and legends, the jaguar was seen as a god in Peru, Mexico, Guatemala, in pre-Columbian America. The Mayans, Aztecs, and Inca all worshiped the jaguar in some form. The Jaguar's medicine includes, listen, seeing the roads within chaos. Now, this is going to go back, family, to the branch coming out of the roots of Jesse and these powers that would activate in us. The Jaguar's medicine includes seeing the roads within chaos, understanding the patterns of chaos, moving without fear in the darkness, moving in unknown places, shape-shifting, psychic vision. Psychic vision, family, happens in the astral plane at some times, facilitating soul work, empowering oneself, reclaiming power. Reclaiming power. So with that, we're going to end right there. We've made this connection again over eons of time and connected with a specific ancestor. A specific ancestor. When you go, and I encourage people to research this, that the information on Ankh Khonsu is so scarce. And the one video that we looked at is probably the only informative video that I was able to find. When Maisha and I, when we looked at the films together, you saw people chanting and doing that sort of thing, but they'll tell you about the temple where the stela was found, but the actual person, a mystery. But what I'm telling you is that this brother presented himself and is presenting himself to us as an aid and a guide at this particular point. Now, it's up to us. It's up to us to make use of this great privilege that we've received. We're getting closer and closer to the activation of our power. Look, we don't have to read a ton of books to do this. Look at a ton of video. Let us go inside and connect with our ancestors. We got to go past, y'all. It's all right. You can do it. So with that, I'm going to say wholeness to everyone and open it up for questions and comments at this time.